trained for a scenario like this my entire life. But it's worse than anything we could have imagined. We don't have much insight.
Hello, Logan here from the Dimp Digital team, bringing you a review on Tom Clancy's The Division by Ubisoft. This game gets the official buy it rating from the Dimp team, but how does it stack up against the other games that we've played recently? Is it as good as everyone says it is? Find out here.
Every criminal group that we've been dealing with is controlling most of these neighborhoods. Taking whatever they want, killing whoever they want, because we got nobody to stop them. Burn them! In an area this size, this many bad guys, I just don't like the idea of throwing you to the wolves.
Captain, we are the wolves. These are my people. This is my city. We're taking it back.
So why am I reviewing this game? Why have I chose to take over from the maps and actually look at this one? Well, I put a lot of time into Destiny, which this has been compared to, and we have played through pretty much the whole game. We haven't done the latest incursion that's out there. I think we've got a few side missions to do, but we've had a good go at it, spent well over a day on it, and we feel like I'm in a good spot to review this, not just because, and I don't want to give it unfair comparisons to Destiny, but they're in the same sort of ballpark. So Destiny for me sets the bar for an RPG. So let's see how I stack this one up, not necessarily just against Destiny, but in general as a solid RPG. Before we get into the actual review, I'll try and give you a bit of background on what the game is and what the setting is without giving away too much of the storyline. The Division is set in New York City in the aftermath of a disease outbreak similar to smallpox, and you are brought in as a second wave of agents to come in, find out what's happened and combat any criminal activity that's occurred since the pandemic, basically. You're there to bring them down and restore order, essentially. And when you get straight into it, you can see that it's a good looking game. It's quite impressive. They set the scene quite well in that the graphics are good, and you can see everything in a lot of detail. But it's also quite a dark setting. There's a lot of snow, and the atmosphere is really quite dark in that you get the impression that something bad and serious has happened here. It's not all sun shining, and you know, there's cars everywhere, there's rubbish everywhere, you can see bodies, there's piles of dead bodies everywhere. You can really get the feel for what's happened, and I feel that they do that quite well in this game. You really sort of get the feeling that you're in the middle of this pandemic outbreak and that you're trying to figure out what's going on. As for actually gameplay mechanics and how it plays, it's very smooth. It feels good. It doesn't feel too clunky. You can get into your cover quite easily. You can shoot blind fire. You can get out of cover and back into it quickly, move between cover. And this game in essence is a cover shooter, i.e. that you need it to survive. Otherwise, generally, if you get into an out and out firefight with these enemies, you will get put down. And you know, that has happened quite a lot, and you do need your team there to go and get you when that happens. And it sort of reminds you every now and again that you go, right, you may have got new guns, you may have got new armour, and but you're still at the mercy of it. You still have to keep in that cover. I feel that it works quite well in that respect, that they do give you the cover enough for you to be able to use the game successfully. So let's break this game down into its sort of key features, if you like. The first point for me is the cover shooting. So this is essential, as I've already mentioned. You need to utilise this cover to stay alive. It's generally very well placed, so you can tackle enemies quite tactically in that you can go right, I'll take left, you take right, and then you converge on a point. You will need to do that as well. The enemies are quite clever, they will try and get round you. So in the same that I say they generally give you the cover, there are some missions that it doesn't. It gives you one sort of bit of cover that you have to just stay behind, and then you have to try and get these enemies down. They almost come at you in waves, so you need to get out there, get some ammo, get back into cover. That can be quite challenging. I know me and Apps had a few nightmares on a few missions where we were going, right, where is this cover? How am I supposed to stay alive? But sometimes you just have to be a bit more inventive with where you're taking cover and where you have to go to get the best position on these enemies. So while it can be frustrating, just persevere with it, try and find the best place for you. The sticky cover does work well. You sort of can move in and out of cover quite quickly, and you can change items on the fly to help you out, throw out your special sort of assistant powers, if you like. It's the only way I can describe it, and it works quite well in that respect. On the lower level weapons, you have to be quite accurate to be able to use the actual gun mechanics, so there's a lot of recoil. You just have to manage that, and don't expect to just be able to stay behind that cover, shoot a load out, reload. You have to manage how you're shooting, so you can't just hold the button, but it works very well for me. The second point, and probably maybe some people would consider this the most important thing on these sort of games, is the loot. How good and how much do you enjoy getting the loot? Well, for me, it's always the carrot on the end of the stick. You really are always striving in these types of games to get that loot upgrade, to get that new gun, to get that new bit of armour, and that is exactly the same in The Division. You really want that upgraded AK-47, you really want that new sniper rifle, that marksman rifle, to take you to the next level, to make things be that little bit easier, and for you to be that little bit more powerful over your friend. And generally for me, I found that loot was only worth getting through random drops at the end of the mission. So the big guy that you take down, the boss, his drops are the ones that are worth getting. You may get something every now and again from a chest or from a lower level enemy drop, but it's really infrequent. And also, due to the real life nature of this game, the loot is generally disappointing in that it's constrained by real life. So you can only get a statistically better AK-47 or a statistically better pistol, and in that way it kind of takes that X factor, because everything becomes stats driven, so you're just comparing stats as to what's better. Some have got some better perks to the guns, if you like, but generally you're looking at those damage stats, and that's where I start to compare it to Destiny, where you go, Destiny have got that sort of magic, that X factor they can add to a gun to make it that little bit more interesting and that little bit more desirable. And for me, the loot on this was always something that I wanted to get, but it never really lived up to the hype, which is a bit of a shame. And moving on, we'll look at the enemies. I mean, let's be honest, in these games they're always bullet sponges, we know that, but the one thing for me entering this game was, right, they're bullet sponges, how will I feel about plugging a human full of 300 bullets? Is that going to take away from, they're trying to give you this real life setting, but at the same time you're ploughing someone with 300 bullets, and you know that's not going to happen in real life. So did that ever cross my mind when playing it? And I have to be honest, the answer was no, it didn't, and I was quite surprised at that. But the enemies on it are more intelligent than what I found on Destiny. They will try and come at you, they'll try and get around the back of you, they'll move forwards, so you can't just sit back and just pick them off generally. You have to be a little bit more tactical, you have to work as a team to get them down, and if you do sit there at the back and try and pick them off, they will throw grenades like they were world-class shot putters. Honestly, they'll land right at your toes and they will flush you out of that cover. So if you're not on the move, they will make you be on the move. And I think that's the point, is that this game is at its best when you're constantly on the move as well. You don't want to be just sitting back generally and just shooting people. It will take the fun out of it. So change your weapons up, try and be on the move and try and get at these enemies, and if you're doing it as a group as well, you'll really enjoy it. moving on to my last point, and this is probably the one point that many of you have probably heard about, and that is the fabled dark zone. This is outside of the Manhattan, if you like, and these are the zones where anything goes. They're not policed, if you like, by the division. It's just whatever's out there happens. And from a player perspective, this is a PvP zone. So once you're out there, if you're in a team, then you know you work as a team, but you will also meet other players out there. You can shoot the enemy players and go rogue, or you can, and what we found was generally people tend to stick together a little bit, and they form smallish groups to be able to then fight off enemies to get everyone get their loot out. There were scenarios on there where I got put down, and this is a real touchy subject for me, is that I got a really good bit of gear that I was like, right, I need to get this bit of gear out, and I literally got within a millisecond of extracting it from the dark zone, and I got shot down by a rogue player. And honestly, it literally puts you into the red zone. You just lose your mind at how irritating that is, and that shows you how good it can be. But after that happened, I thought, do you know what, I ain't going back in there, it's not worth the stress. And that is the end game, the dark zone, really. You need to be putting the hours into that to get the good stuff, to then be able to do things further on after the end of the game. And am I going to spend ages getting that heartbreak in the dark zone? For me, no. It's not good enough, or it's not, that's not fair really. It's not grabbing me to go back, because I get so annoyed with it when you don't get it out. It kind of deters you from going back the next time, because you think, well, I'm not guaranteed anything, and I might get it out, I might not. And you can also just pick up loads of toot in there. You're not guaranteed to pick up anything amazing unless you find one of the yellow classified enemies, which are the big bastards basically. They tend to drop the best loot, and you know, people can turn on you in a minute, in a millisecond in there, and you're all of a sudden dead and you've lost your loot, and they've picked it up and extracted it. So while it's an interesting concept, I think there's nothing I can think of that a game has introduced in this manner before. I just don't feel like there is enough in there for me to go back to it, and I feel like once you've completed the game, I don't have that desire to then go back and get any more loot, because I've done the game. Just because I can do one more incursion, is that enough for me to grind for another day maybe to get enough gear to then go back and do one more mission where it's just going to be uprated enemies to get more gear that I don't need? Again, for me, I'm not interested. So the game ended for me once I'd completed it. So let's bring this to a close. Dimp Digital gives this game an official silver grading. It sits there with some of the better games that we've played. It's a very good, very solid game, but for me, it just lacks that little X factor to take it to the next level. Thanks for your time, and ta-da.
No limits. Our job is to protect what remains.
We are your co-workers. We are your neighbors. We might even be your friends.
But when we get the call,
we leave everything behind.
We are
the Division.